February 4, 2019 meeting of the Redevelopment Authority of the City of Oshkosh. As a reminder, please turn your cell phones down. That's what I was doing. Please take the roll.
Tom Belter,
Here.
Jack Birmingham,
Here.
Steve Hintz,
Here.
Jason Lasky, Archie Stam,
Here.
Steve Cummings.
Here. First on the agenda is the consent approval of minutes from January 16 of 2019.
Move approval with a minor change to resolution, what number is that?
Thank you.
19-02.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Next, we have new business. At this point, I'll turn over to Mr. Davis.
Sure.
I knew your name. I just wanted to make sure you were set to go.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. If you recall, last fall, Merge made a presentation to the RDA regarding Parcel J. Since that time, they've talked to staff quite a bit about Parcel J and the neighborhood. As time has gone by, I think they've taken a look at the neighborhood around Marion Road, what's going on in the downtown area, and they've prepared a what I'd describe as a nice PowerPoint that kind of describes their approach to the project and how this might change for Parcel J, as well as how it would incorporate potentially Parcels H and I. So with that, I think I'd like to turn it over to you guys for a nice PowerPoint presentation on the update on H, I, and J.
Great.
Good for you guys.
Thank you. Thank you for having us back. We're excited to be here and to share some progress. What we've done in the interim, we have met with city staff, worked with them quite a bit, talked about strategy for a little bit more of a district approach to parking and development of those three parcels. And then the other thing that we did, we came out for about 2 days and spent some time meeting some individuals in the community and learning from them some of the ideas of what's special about Oshkosh or what's happened over time here. We learned about the music festival and the history of that. We learned about just a very humble mindset of always moving forward pretty innovatively, but not with a lot of fanfare, and we like that. It's very appealing to us. We're also Midwesterners. And then we did a little bit of research then too, or we also met with the co-op food market, which was fun. We met with the university as well. Learned a lot, but kept hearing kind of similar narratives, but meeting with those people, connected with the kinesiology department in particular, and that they have some good entrepreneurship or internship type opportunities through that program, where some health and wellness components could be bridged between our site, our program, and their program. So some really exciting connections. That's really what we try to do. That's why we come out. That's why we get our boots on the ground. And I'll just jump in a little bit. So I have all the background in here. Some of it's a little bit similar to what you've seen before. So interrupt me if you want to talk about anything, or if you want to go back to anything, that's fine too. But I did want to just include it so that if there's any questions about background or what we're doing or who we are, that's great. But really our mindset is to come together and to come up alongside and not just be a visiting developer dropping in ideas from some other community, but to actually come and use what we've learned in places that we've worked, and then come up alongside things that are already happening in the community and hopefully build them up. We work in opportunity zones in communities that have opportunity zones in the Midwest. So that's a key component to some of the capital that goes into our projects. And then the team that you have here, Brent and Joy, are with Merge Urban Development, and I'm one of 3 principals at Slingshot Architecture in Des Moines. And Andrea is one of my team members in the office that helps put this stuff together. So yeah, we focus on trying to find people, partnerships to connect with in the community to integrate into a development so that it makes it more active. We focus on really a couple things. We provide market rate living in cities. We're excited to do that. That's part of our program. But then the other thing that we focus on is an active ground plane, something that maybe gets missed a lot in development these days, or maybe in how we're developing cities. And so we focus a lot on how to make sure that the ground level is an active place where people are bumping into each other and interacting and having things to do, having both destinations and walkable events to go do. And we prioritize people, pedestrians, over cars in those situations. So we'll tell you a little bit about how we do that. So this is one that really rang true for this project, most of our projects really, but Jan Gehl has been instrumental, his firm working in Copenhagen. They've a very study-driven approach to practice, and also sociology intermixes into their work. And so this statement is just right on the nose. Cultures and climates differ all over the world, but people are the same, and they'll gather in public if you give them a good place to do it. So that's really what a vibrant city has, is these gathering points, and you have some of them, and we want to add to that. The other thing that I really like to point out from there, when I was over in Copenhagen, they had weather just like it is today, and they're out eating in cafes under heat lamps. And not exactly what we see in the Midwest, but it's the same weather if you just have a good mindset about it. Our contact information is included in here, and we don't mind anyone reaching out directly. So just a quick, slingshot architecture, this is really what drives us. We want to engage community with the focus so that people in place can transform. And we have a process that we run through every project. We know that it yields good results. We've been doing it for about 10 years. And it's really to be investigative first before we start throwing out design ideas. So really the whole effort that I said about getting our boots on the ground and being here, that was really, we just had a site diagram that we were testing and starting to work on. We didn't have architectural ideas before that, but we built up to some based on those visits, based on that time. We've also made changes since we saw you last. And I'll focus on those. But we know that really builds the momentum that makes great projects, makes great impacts in the cities. And so this is our city, Des Moines, where we grew up as an architecture firm. We're a 15-year-old firm. The first 10 years, we were really 80% in our downtown core. And these are the projects, the dots, the solid dots are done, and the ones that are dashed are in progress right now. So we've been fortunate to have a lot of opportunity and impact in our community, and we really want to take that, what we've learned there about building connectivity and mix the strength of mixing uses and making spaces where people have a good experience, user experience focused. And also, I don't know if a lot of architects will say this, but the space between buildings actually being more important than the buildings themselves, where the people go and where people do things in cities. So these are some things we look at. These are some of the projects we've done, both Slingshot and with Merge. We've been doing work together for about 3 years. So we look at different scales. Midwestern cities, there's a need for kind of a low-rise solution too that's got some good density to it. So this is a riverfront site in Des Moines. Another riverfront site in Des Moines. And then in Cedar Falls, where I met Brent a few years ago, we worked on a development on the river there. That was really kind of an industrial site that was getting redone, and we worked some of those ideas into that project. This is the project that we're doing with Brent with Echo Development in Cedar Falls. And just one thing to highlight here that's kind of fun, this is a really busy street that this is on, but the vision in the city is to promote walkability. So there was a very wide right-of-way, and so we made a very protected pedestrian space with street planters and trees that collect water and treat rainwater and are really rain gardens in the street. But that gives about a 10 to 12 foot buffer to that pedestrian experience on a relatively busy street. So we mixed in ground floor retail, made parking solutions happen that were screened from the public way. Similar approach here, screening parking and linking a plaza that was actually elevated to the levee level Again, this is actually the first, maybe one of the first opportunity zone projects in the nation with Merge. And that plaza, that elevated plaza, was really completely underutilized. People that lived in the community didn't even know it was up there, and there's a great amphitheater up there and gets you on top of the levee and looks at the river. But because you can't really see it, you can't see if there's anything going on up there, people don't walk up there very much. So the building adds vibrancy and transparency to an upper level space where there will be a restaurant, and the lobby is also transparent so you can see that connection. Just down the road from that project, we're working on another one that infills in a little bit more, kind of on the edge of the walkable part of Waterloo, next to some industrial properties. So this one has a little bit more of an industrial character to it, but it still has retail at the corner and integrates in some shared amenity spaces on the ground plane. So I'm not going to read all this to you, but this is part of our process. We want to try to find the words to what the right solution is here before we get into the solution. First, we organize everything that we collected into statements of facts and goals and concepts and needs. And one of the things we learned about was that there's a co-op in the community that's building up some momentum. So we met with them, talked about what their needs might be. So they're a great candidate for our ground plane. We also learned about really that Marion Road is intended to serve as an access for activity on the river. We think that we can be a good connection to the trail and also a possible launch to some riverfront activities. And then we narrate the goals. We call them drivers of the project. What's going to drive the project forward, about that pedestrian space and about a place where people come together. That Marion Road's had a lot of building on it so far. It doesn't necessarily have a pedestrian center to it yet, but there's a lot of people living there. So we have a great opportunity that they can all walk over to our site as well. Do a lot of analysis on zoning and what's going on, so we got a handle on that and have met with the city to work to learn more about that as well. And then we look at what we can walk to. Really, the Sawdust District and Main Street are both really walkable. The two circles the two yellow circles on the plan, the smaller one's a 5-minute walk and the second one's a 10-minute walk. 5-minute walk is kind of that zone where you could just go walk your dog, have a casual walk. 10-minute walk is kind of where you might go to a destination, go to a restaurant you want to go to. So there's a lot here. There's a lot here already. Really, you can get over to campus in that 10-minute walk. And then public transportation that you have too is well integrated into the site. We looked at that and just looked at a little bit more of that flow there. So we adjusted the site plan a little bit from what you saw before. We used to have kind of the parking up against the Anthem parking. And what we found, or what we wanted to focus on, we still wanted to have a good connection mid-site to activate some retail spaces and to activate some program there and make a good pedestrian connection to the riverfront. And then we're working with our civil group to possibly propose a way to launch kayaks from the site as well. That's kind of the dash box on the bottom side and a potential image of what that could look like up on the upper left. But in talking to the co-op, they talked about if they were going to have a retail center here, a retail presence here, they'd want to be right on the corner with high visibility, and then with direct access to parking. So the blue box at the corner of Jackson and Marion becomes that potential space. And then the parking obviously has direct access to that. And then we use some low-rise walk-up units. We're picturing them as live-work units, so it could be a small office use or a living use on that Marion Road to, again, fill most of the parking and start to create that pedestrian space a little bit more on Marion. And then the big change then is that it's not two parallel line buildings, it's really one building that faces directly out onto the water that's mainly residential focused, and then so that's on the left and bottom of the plan. And that blue box over there is that component that could integrate some of that kinesiology fitness program. And then all the way, hopefully you're tracking all my descriptions, all the way to the bottom right, that blue box would be the restaurant space, key space right on the river. And then there's a couple small blue boxes that you might be able to pick out there, and those are micro retail. Micro retail, we build out the backside infrastructure, the bathrooms to share, and the mechanical, so that the build outs are really lightweight for startup retailers. So the strategy with the yellow is where we were showing the chamber, and if they wanted to have an office presence here, we met with them on the phone, had a call, had originally put them where I said the kinesiology idea is. They wanted some presence out to Jackson, so we're showing them this. It might work for them or it might not. We can always change that out for retail. The strategy with merge is always to open day one with 50% of our retail filled. And that's a really unique offering in the development community. Usually developers are good at residential or good at commercial. And this group is the best that I've seen across both, in that we leverage other relationships and other communities, if needed, to fill that retail up. Or if we can partner with people like the co-op and get them in there, or the chamber, we love to do that. So there's still an opening in the building to connect over to the previous mall parking. We're not really putting that in our accounts, but I think it's a future opportunity if parking was an issue, that maybe some nighttime parking for residents could be shared over there. All right, so building form and architecture. I'm going to keep this pretty brief, but this is where we started thinking about how this could look and how this could be specific to your place. And we were so struck by, like, Lake Winnebago, this inland lake, is such a large body of water, and it's influencing really your culture here about being out on the water and the types of boats that you have here and things that's really unique for the Midwest. And so we started digging into that a little bit, and really we found that the escarpment, the rock forms that are in Lake Winnebago, are actually part of this huge cliff system, this escarpment landform from glacier movement. And you guys probably already know this, but we were learning, and connected all the way over to Niagara Falls, and what a unique condition that is. And then as we started looking at research of what started the logging industry and why did Oshkosh do so well, why was Oshkosh supplying so much of the lumber and things going back to Chicago after the fire, all these stories that we were reading. And really this land formation influenced that. The Wolf River, the way that it's very flat and wide and slow moving and things, really was perfect for logging, and it connected to a lot of different other forests and things. So these geological conditions really formed how the city grew, and that was exciting to us, or exciting to dig into and learn about. And then we learned about the section, the drawing down on the bottom right is the diagram of what an escarpment is, and so the glacier and the water movement, carved away at these cliffs, and they're often kind of sheer cliffs, and so that's really what's on the east side of Lake Winnebago, and then when that happens, there can be these outlier cliffs. And so there's lots of imagery of that in Wisconsin and things. So we thought about that this building could kind of be that outlier cliff, that it could be something that felt permanent, that kind of put a capstone on the neighborhood, that identified the neighborhood from the bridges and from driving around the city, and could kind of be bold, like these really carved cliff forms that are really striated. These are the cliffs that are against Lake Winnebago over there, and they're different than the ones we have in Des Moines. The sheerness of them and the really horizontal striations of that of the layers of sediment, and then also when there's I don't know if I have do I have a laser? Maybe. All right. Oh, I don't know if you're gonna see it. All right. Anyway, so when the rocks in the certain conditions kind of have fallen away and the corner's missing. It's like this really cool cantilever with this really triangular shadow, and so we were really taken by that. And then we looked at the neighborhood, and the neighborhood already has kind of some of these tectonic things in it, these masses of stone in the next door parcel over at Anthem, and then at Annex, the way that some of those gray and white masses were put on each other. They feel like they're kind of like little stones and little layers in the neighborhood. So our idea was to take it from that and then go take that up to kind of a signature level, a memorable experience level. And let me just jump here. So in the imagery here, the part of the building that's over on Jackson can have that really horizontal feel to it, and then that the retail, the restaurant portion of this end of the building and the retail end of the other building can be kind of like that shadow underneath those striations of rock. And so we were using those ideas to break down the building masses into what meets the planning guidelines as well. So forms every 70 feet, and masonry and glass for 50% of the facade. So those are really met by this concept as well. The upper story can be this metal panel solution, and then the bottom black portion can be this dark brick shadow idea, and what could be the offices for the chamber can be another stone and glass piece. And then in between those is where you can enter. So if I go back, so you see these red lines, pedestrian, that line over from the right, to be able to possibly share parking and connect back to the other side of the street, and then that courtyard view. I'll go to the parking strategy later. So courtyard view of what it's like to walk through the site in a very pedestrian space and get out to the river in between the two buildings. And then the gray box on the top part of the right side here is a wood or a wood appearance type panel that kind of goes with maybe a little bit of the historic warehouses that were on the building, on these sites. A lot of times they were clad in wood or something, but also just kind of riverfront type of property, and that the building over on the left is really those units that just connect right out to the river. You're right in the city, but you just see river out of your unit, and some walk-up units on the base of that. The glass box underneath that gray mass is where we're looking at a fitness program, possibly teaming with the university. So we're excited about that. I will talk about parking a little bit. We don't have the water tower on here. We didn't quite get that right, but we'll reconfigure the numbers. The strategy that we worked through with the city was to propose what we've seen as successful in other developments. And so what we wanted to do was figure out how we're going to have to propose a variation to the parking per code. So parking per code is 2 stalls per every unit type. We're putting in a lot of studios and 1-bedrooms. That's really the demand for urban space right now, and a need that we've seen in this community. So that doesn't really park at that 2 spaces per, but we see it park at about 1 1/4 per unit. So doing the math on 1 1/4 stalls per unit as an average, we have about 80% kind of 1-bedrooms or studios. So the gray bar over there on the left is that, and then the purple above it is the need per code for commercial and retail and office. And so we envision that can be shared, because those times will offset. The residential will need more on the nighttime, and the office and retail need more during the day. And particularly that lot that's centralized to parcel J here is going to need to be all available during the day. So that permit system will have to be worked out. But then that yellow bar over on the right, that's representative of how many are approximated on this layout here between the 3 sites. So what we want to do is share mixed-use parking, not super scientific as a strategy. It's in good urban areas, the public can share across the different sites, and then there won't be as many vacant parking spots sitting there all day or all night, but they'll be shared throughout the day at different times. So that's our strategy, to combine the 3 sites really to do that over time through the day, and strengthen the pedestrian realm on, or the public realm on Marion in particular, so that pedestrians feel like they can really walk between the different sites, and it wouldn't really matter as a resident if you're parking across the street or directly on site. And then the other thing, so H and I on Jackson, these would be future phases, but on Jackson we would do, right now we're just doing a unit count at 3 stories, so 1 story of retail with 2 stories of residential above it. And then on Marion, the 3 kind of step buildings are walk-up, like townhomes. So that we put front doors and activity on Marion, so it feels like a pedestrian space and not just parking lots on the street. So we think that linkage will start to come together pretty well. And then what this gives us too over time is we can get the phase 1 going, and we can see what the parking need is, or how the parking works out. When we did that in Cedar Falls, we have one that's just built out this year. They're finishing their last phase. They ended up parking at like 40% of the need, or they had 40% available from the city standard. It basically overshot this mixed use need. And so it's kind of proof that in actually living in a shared use condition like this, it does tend to work out. So but the advantage of the future phases is that really, like, that 3-story building could be 2, or it could be 4 if there's not a lot of parking need, or it could go down in density if needed. So that's the approach. That's what we've worked on over time, and I'd love to answer any questions you guys have.
Have you looked at a parking structure?
Cost prohibitive to this type of development. Yeah. Where else?
Parking lots themselves lend themselves that if there was a future initiative by the city to gather more parking, those parking lots would be available to do that. If we found out down the road that maybe you needed an extra space for even a different development, those sites would be available to erect something at that time. But current market rents don't lend itself to be able to afford a parking structure at this time.
Thanks.
Be your timeline for fully exploring these options?
So, if everything goes smoothly here, you mean like to construction maybe?
Well,
or do you
option
mean?
period and then through construction, yes.
Yeah. So, I think generally speaking, if everything goes well, we'd be targeting 2020 spring for construction. We're working in one other community right now that's going to go before this and probably get in the ground in 2019, and we'd like to queue this up right away in the spring. It takes about 6 to 8 months planning just on my side, architecture and all of our consultants, to get our first building, or maybe these 2 first buildings, ready to go for construction. And other than that, I don't know if you want to talk about where you're at right now with the other process.
We're just we need to get the phase 1 and phase 2 exploration as far as any contamination. So we're in that already. We've talked to the DNR. We expect that to take the next 30 to 45 days. In the meantime, then we can start working on the development agreement and then what the actual need is of this site to make it feasible. And so that would be on your timeline, and I'm not exactly 100% sure what you would need for time, but then Dan needs that 6 months after that, where we have that development agreement, and then we can dig. So generally speaking, it seems like 1 year from now, we could be ready to dig if it all went as planned.
Well, talk about your decision variables and what Is it the number of units, the net operating income, the profit it can throw off, the maximum best use of the site? How are you merging all those together to make a decision to come to Oshkosh?
So we learned a few things from mid-sized cities, and one of the great questions that you just already asked is what type of construction type that we can bring and make it so that it makes sense on the end. And so we know that rental rates in these size town are generally the same, and we've checked that. And so this town compared to Cedar Falls, and you know, if you even want to loop in Stevens Point and similar ones that of this size, have the same rental rate. So we need to have this construction type, 4 to 5 stories, which is a very specific construction type, without having parking underneath, which this site wouldn't allow for anyway due to the soils. So we need to have that level of construction, and with 4 to 5 stories in order to meet, in the end, what we know would work on a financial basis. So those are really the metrics we're looking for, which usually requires a bigger site like you have. So that if you have a really tight site, it would take a lot more of a capital stack in order to make it work, or it'd be later in the phase of Oshkosh when maybe rents have reached a higher level, similar to a Madison or a Des Moines or a Milwaukee area. So these cities have a real large need for those studios and 1 bedrooms, because 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and 4 bedrooms were built a lot in these areas, especially in the 90s and even in throughout 2000, whether that was college housing or townhome type builds. And so the one thing that was missed was that studio and 1 bedroom, because how people are living is so different, and not getting married as soon, and living on their own, which I never did, but that's, you know, it's just changed rather quickly, and these towns didn't get that huge build like a Madison or Des Moines during when all those different things were changing with people.
I assume, given that this, I know the city is really behind this, we're behind this, I think the private sector is behind this. So are you getting enough help from city, from organizations, from private groups, from your, everybody else in the development world? Would you like more help, and where would you like that?
It's been really great. So Oshkosh is, from day one, with Kelly, has been open arms with us, and it was kind of more of to find out if we were serious, I think, for a little bit, if it were just another developer coming to town. And I hope after today it's really clear that we're extremely serious about this, and that you're one of our top priorities for our opportunity zone. And so it's been excellent, and the amount of people that are needing space or wanting space on that first floor, which is very important for this project being successful, not just from a financial perspective, but for people enjoying the space. We need to have engagement of people wanting to be there, and we also don't want to be seen as a competitor and bringing in outside uses that might compete with things that are already here. So it feels good to us that we're filling a need of space that maybe just is lacking, that there's just not enough space for these tenants that are looking today. But more help is always better.
We're here for you. So.
We hear a lot in the city that there's a lack of housing. We keep hearing a lot of, I guess, low-income housing, but there's a lack of housing, period. And I made the comment that if everyone who works for the city, works for the school district, the university, the 2 major hospitals, Oshkosh, Corp, Bemis, that didn't live here, wanted to move here, there's no place for them to live. So what would this complex solve as far as, if we all said, come on down to Oshkosh, we've got all sorts of new housing, what niche do you think you would start filling for those type of, people who currently live in the Appletons, the Ninas, and so forth?
I think every single one. I know is broad, but we have townhomes, studios, 1 bedrooms, and so you start to, where we could have a young family, we could have a couple that is starting off. You could hit almost every spectrum, where if you were making $12 an hour, $16 an hour, you could find you'd be okay in that studio apartment. But if you were maybe a doctor just getting started, maybe you would need a walk-up unit. And so 300 bedrooms, 300 units really almost, that would be a few years of single-family home development and roads constructed, and we can do it all in one shot. And so I think that it would be a great stopgap of a few years of normal construction all on one site.
I think the idea that we always try to capitalize on is that the uses, the public realm, the connection to the city, the connection to the water, those elements are the big amenity. And then we want to bring all those different aspects of living together so that they're bumping into each other and they're living there together, through whatever phases of life are right for that. So that's kind of where our unit mix starts from. That's why we're densifying the riverfront site. And that's the big idea.
I may be anticipating further discussion, presentation, but I'm just quickly interested in your decision to get the option on parcel H and how all of these, and also on I understand that in terms of really more parking kinds of things, but what was your consideration and how do they all fit together?
Well, if I start and you guys fill in, parking's part of it, but really neighborhood experience is part of it too. So to be able to leverage the 3 sites together and it lets us densify the riverfront more, so we get more people living there and centralizing on some of these public spaces. But like I mentioned, with being able to build on the other side of Marion Road too, now we get to impact the character of that street and the walkability of that street as well. And we'd love to have that be part of the story, that we all look back on this in 2-3 years and we say, isn't Marion a nice street to walk down, and doesn't it feel pedestrian and friendly? And then the same thing to fill out the mixed-use site that didn't get built on Jackson as well, to hold that street edge. One of the things that we talked about with the planning group in particular when we met was that they had a few experiences just right in this neighborhood where they were trying to push the development teams to build right up next to the street, to do 0 lot line development and park in the back and make walkable spaces up in the front, and that they had pushback that wasn't going to command the retailers. So we want to give those successful stories, create a good streetscape, give them what's being envisioned, so that then it can be pointed to that, isn't this nice? Let's keep doing this.
So the totality makes a big
We love being
difference.
able to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Were there any discussions held about going east of Jackson? There's some properties there that I think we'd all like to see vanish. Did you look at down the road, I'm not talking to 2020, but into the future, what could happen to those properties as a continuation of this?
The interesting thing about the Opportunity Zone program is it's different than all other, where a developer would maybe come to town and do a project and leave. But this program is so great because you have to be here for 10 years. So we're very committed to the city. And one of the goals of our fund is to not just do this one project in any city, that we see Oshkosh as needing more than this, although that might be hard to see if you're conservative in the Midwest, and you might think, wow, 300 units is a lot. But to your point, we believe this would just be the first of many, and we would continue both ways in going wherever the city saw the largest need for future development.
Is your fund established yet, your Opportunity Zone Fund?
So there's a different one set up for every project.
So
So
single-
one of the projects you saw earlier fully has started and fully funded, and then you start up a new fund for each individual city. So it would be the Oshkosh Opportunity Zone Fund.
Who builds your structures? I mean, you use local contractor subs to the extent you can?
Correct. So locally, we would self-perform back in Iowa, but that's not the case, right? It takes relationships with local vendors and local subcontractors. So we've discussed with a few different contractors in Wisconsin that'd be very interested in doing this project, but we're still in the interview stage, and now we have something to really talk about after today.
No other questions, or?
What happens next?
Well, the next steps are the environmental, and then the big one is the development agreement. And so we'd like to hit both of them as quickly as possible, and we'll lean on the city to whatever it will take to do that. And we're ready to get right into that, as long as everything here looks good to the RDA.
Okay.
this summer? What's the date that is on the option?
July 31.
Right.
And that would keep you on schedule that we referenced earlier. Okay.
Going back to one of your slides, and also you had mentioned about walkway path, there was sort of a dotted line coming down, and it actually, where was it? No, it was of the whole parcel. I'm not seeing it there. Am I imagining it?
These, kind of the.
It was that one, but it actually was a dotted line that came actually right practically through the parking area of the existing building there on the north side of Marion Road. That, I don't see it there, but am I imagining?
Maybe it's back there.
Maybe I, don't worry about it.
What was the question about how to?
Okay, I
What
see.
about
I mean,
six?
your main point was walkability on J, and that's fine. It was something on the north side, but don't worry about it. We'll
Okay.
find it later.
One of the things that, so it's pretty exciting to us to create a space in here where some public activity, both spill out from restaurants and fitness type activities can happen, and hopefully, launching some boats and stuff like that. The other thing that's in flux is that we've learned a lot about was, the Jackson Street Bridge inside of 10 years could be very different than it is today. And so we wanted to come up with an idea that worked with, regardless of how it gets solved. We would advocate for, trying not to ramp up too far and making pedestrian space that's kind of covered, but the courtyard approach with balancing, frontages that go both ways, we think we're kind of hedging our bets a little bit there. But we'll have glass to both sides and things like that. But hopefully it can be flexible to that. And one of the conversations we had in the city meeting was about, like today, there's not really an opinion of should we let them should we try to ask for the drawbridge? Should we let it be this big ramped viaduct condition? And so, we're building optimistically, or we're providing a concept that's optimistic to say, let's keep it pedestrian space and try to, build upon that. But even if it didn't, it's still a strong solution. So we don't want to build too short-sightedly like that and not be providing for 10 years down the road.
Just a couple of questions. Since we are in the Midwest, we have kind of long winters. Are there things that you can incorporate or have incorporated to make these outdoor spaces a little more attractive or user-friendly in our winters? We can't do much of the river because of current. It's not the lake, but are there things that you can, I think more the holidays. Some cities really incorporate a lot of holiday attractions to keep, business and things lively for a couple of months. Are there things that you've thought about or can be incorporated?
Yeah, we're really excited about that, and that's something that we talk to the ground floor tenant, retail, and maybe if it's a co-op or something. That's something we bring up with them about how can we extend this use, like what would you actually do, and so we've got kind of a bank of images that I have from my trip to Copenhagen and some other things in some other communities, but we're excited to really promote that. And so this setup is really for that. I think some of the things we can do are make, kind of a durable path that can be cleared off of snow so that it's still a pathway, even in a snowstorm or something. I think we can also provide some spaces that can be heated, or provide the infrastructure to be able to heat your outdoor cafe space and extend that season. If we put heaters under where you can sit, maybe people aren't going to dine out today like I pitched in the beginning, but maybe an extra month or two, right? Let's, start the attitude.
Some of the ski hills have heated
Yeah.
walkways, so that you don't have to shovel snow or ice.
Yeah.
I think in time people will. I think once they know it's available, that it's fun to do. It's just getting people used
We
to
were
it.
really excited to hear. Did you hear Eau Claire is part of they're one of 3 cities in a program called Winter Mission, where it's like an active program that they're going to try to take that on as a topic as a community. So anyway, we're going to put that mindset into all the projects. But
I think it'd be great. I mean, yeah.
Yes.
And that question is not, all the boat docks, those are transient, correct, right now?
Yes,
There's no water, there's no power.
correct.
Is that something that we should, again, long range, think about?
We could think about it. I know we considered it originally. The costs were quite expensive to install it immediately. I guess I'd have to see the need for it and how the dollars and cents would work for extending those utilities.
We had an issue on management and control and revenue and how, you know, just the whole revenue thing.
Is that something you want more of over time, like people living in houseboat conditions or something?
I would not say that's the case. It was
Okay.
more a question during the typical boating season.
Okay.
It's more like, how do you extend more users in that neighborhood?
Okay.
Of the boat docks.
Got it.
And, the 24 or 48 hours, I forget what the rules are about how long you can keep a boat there. That's something we do have to deal with.
Uh-huh.
I think it'd be good, looking at it because of restaurants and so forth, that people that don't want to go by boat, but don't want to go home by boat, for obvious reasons. We all know what we're talking about.
I don't know what you mean.
This is great. I mean, it's one of the best presentations I've ever seen as far as development in the city.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us. We're excited to move forward.
Did you guys go over to High Cliff? Is that where you got that one picture?
We do some, or my team, I can't even take, they do some great internet research.
Oh,
Yeah.
virtual visit, okay.
Yeah, we had a virtual visit that. We spent 2 days here in the city, but we didn't get out to the.
Actually, it's a cool park, you should.
Yeah. Well, if we can keep coming up here more often, yeah, we'll do it.
Closer today, you can drive across.
Right.
No, there's some holes out there now.
With the warming, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
If there are no further questions or discussion, I move on to Resolution 19-04, which is approve option to purchase parcel I in Marion Road redevelopment area, Merge LLC.
Move it.
Second?
Second, discussion. Please take the roll.
Felter,
Aye.
Birmingham,
Aye.
Hintz,
Aye.
Stam,
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Motion carried 5-0.
Next, we have Resolution 19-05, approve option to purchase a portion of parcel H in Marion Road redevelopment area, Merge LLC. Look for a motion and a second.
Just
Approval of 19-05?
second.
Discussion. Would you please take the roll?
Felter, Birmingham,
Aye.
Hintz,
Aye.
Stam,
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Motion carried 5-0.
Mr. Davis, I'll turn it over to you for the Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last time, we just touched on the Oshkosh Arena in general terms. There's the question with the Wisconsin DNR and some new environmental requirements that we're looking at. And we didn't have the city attorney available, who's been leading the charge when it comes to dealing with the DNR. So I guess I'd ask Ms. Lawrenson to maybe take a seat and give the RDA an update as to what we know about the DNR's stance on their environmental cleanup requirements at the arena.
Okay. We are working with them. They changed the VPLE program, so the final certificates of completion are only going to release you for contaminants that have been identified and that you've remediated and worked with. So we are working through the process. We're in the queue of getting our letter put in place. We've had a number of conversations with the DNR council that's working on it, and are basically headed down that path. We have had also some conversation and also sent some information to the developer, and haven't gotten a lot of response from the developer on that, so.
Is this all a PFAS reaction?
That's what initially started it, yeah, but it would be any emerging contaminant, they will no longer cover under the program.
Is that limited to that part of our world, or could that be anywhere in Oshkosh, that PFAS scare that we're going through right now?
I'm probably not the person to ask that
Okay.
question, but it could potentially be found, at any site. It was pretty widely used. In fact, we had argued with the DNR that we didn't think this was a typical site where PFAS would be found, but because of the levels that you're looking for, which is parts per trillion, if you have something on the site or that has been fill materials brought to the site from another location, you could potentially have it anywhere, I would think, so.
But the DNR will not cover us for that in the future.
Unless
Or
it
any-
is tested for and potentially remediated if it's found.
That cleared up this year so that we can actually get the VPLE issued with those conditions and then be able to transfer the property.
Okay. And future agenda items? Do you want to hit on that, or just,
Let's see, I think the one off the top of my head is the Jefferson Street project, that RFP that we might want to issue later this spring. So that'll be on the agenda for March 20th, unless there's anything else the RDA would like me to put on the agenda.
one question about Jefferson Street. I think the last meeting we talked about the east side of Jefferson Street is in need of help. How would we want to approach both sides, or just start with the west side and then think what we can and cannot do with the east side?
Well, we own most of the west side right now, and we can bring you some information on the east side to give you guys an idea of how big a scope you might want to look at for that Jefferson Street project. March 20th.
Move to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
We invited you guys for your drinks today, I know you have.